When my daughter shouted those words, "You will either serve my husband or get out of my house," I didn't respond with anger. No raised voice. No shaking fists. No desperate pleas. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't the smile she expected, not the nervous, conciliatory grin I had worn too many times before when I let myself be humiliated in my own home. This smile was different. It was quiet, cold, final. I picked up my suitcase, the same battered leather one I had carried when I moved her and her mother into this house decades ago, and I walked out. Just like that, she was waiting for me to break down, like I always had. She thought I would beg, that I'd cling to the memory of family dinners and shared laughter. But this time, I left without a word. I left behind the walls I had built, brick by brick, the mortgage I had bled to pay, the house that once echoed with Martha's laughter before the cancer silenced it. A week later, my phone lit up with 22 missed calls, her number, again. But by then, the first seeds of my plan were already in motion. They thought they had stripped me of everything, but I still had patience, I still had time, and I still had my will. They were about to learn a truth I had never spoken aloud. I wasn't the fragile old man they believed me to be. My keys were still warm in my palm when I pushed through the front door that Saturday. The grocery bags dug into my wrists, the sharp plastic biting into my skin until it left angry red welts. The air inside was heavy with the faint smell of beer and stale chips. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the curtains, that golden spring glow I usually loved. The kind of light Martha and I once sat beneath while she knitted by the window. But today, it only illuminated how far this house had fallen. Harry was sprawled in my leather recliner, Martha's last gift to me before death claimed her. He looked like a king on his throne, stocking feet propped up, a half-empty beer bottle dangling loosely from his fingers. The remote sat on his stomach like it belonged there, as if the chair, the television, the house itself were all his by divine right. He didn't even glance at me. Didn't acknowledge that I'd carried in the food with my aching arms. Instead, his voice barked across the room, "Grab me another beer from the fridge while you're up." I froze. Not because of his words, I'd endured worse, but because of the certainty in his tone, as if this wasn't a request, as if he had already rewritten history in his mind, and this house, the one I paid for with my life, was his kingdom now. I set the grocery bags down slowly, feeling the weight of the milk cartons, the bread loaves. Each sound, the rustle of plastic, the thud against the counter, echoed louder than it should have. "Excuse me," I asked, keeping my voice low. "You heard me," Harry muttered, still watching the basketball game. "Corona, not that cheap stuff you drink." Something inside me clenched. I had bought those Coronas for him, with money scraped from my own Social Security. Beer I would never touch, but he demanded it as though it was his birthright. "Harry," I said quietly. "I just walked in. I need to put these groceries away." That finally made him look at me. His face twisted into that expression I had come to know too well, the one that said I was the problem, that I was unreasonable. "What's the big deal? You're already standing. I'm comfortable." I felt it then, something cold, like ice spreading through my chest. "The big deal," I replied evenly, "is that this is my house." That struck a nerve. Harry's feet hit the floor with a thud. He rose to his full height, using every inch, every pound of muscle like a weapon. He was 30, younger, stronger, broader. But I wasn't afraid. I had faced worse men in my life. "Your house," he sneered. "Funny, because your daughter and I live here. We pay the bills, with my money. You're just a guest." He stepped closer, beer still clutched in his hand, the sour smell of alcohol heavy on his breath. "Look, Clark, we can do this. The easy way or the hard way. You want to keep living here peacefully, you play ball. That means when I ask for something, you do it. No questions, no attitude. That's how it works in our house." The kitchen door swung open. Tiffany appeared, her blonde hair pulled back into a messy ponytail, dish towel hanging limp in her hands. She froze, reading the scene instantly. Her husband standing over me, the tension thick enough to slice. "What's going on?" Her voice carried that same sharp edge she had as a teenager, when she tested boundaries she thought I was too tired to enforce. "Your father's being difficult," Harry said smoothly, not taking his eyes off me. "I asked him for a beer, and he's making it into some kind of federal case." Tiffany's eyes shifted to me. That look, oh that look, cut deeper than anything Harry could have said. It was disappointment. Condescension, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Dad, just get him the beer. It's not worth fighting over." And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The bond between them. The united front. Harry smirked, emboldened. He stepped closer, so close the air between us burned with his arrogance. "See, Clark, that's how it's going to be. You live in our house, you contribute. And when I give an order, you follow it. Understand?" I kept my voice level, though my heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might crack my ribs. "Our house?" I repeated slowly. "That's right," Tiffany said, stepping beside her husband. Their silhouettes merged in the kitchen light, a wall I could no longer pass through. "Dad, you need to decide right now. Either you help Harry and do what he asks, or you can pack your things and leave." The words hung in the air like smoke, filling every corner of the room until I could barely breathe. I looked at my daughter, my little girl, who once curled into my lap during thunderstorms, clutching my shirt with tiny fingers, whispering that she needed me to keep her safe. I searched her face for that girl, but she was gone, and in her place stood a stranger. She stared back at me with Harry's same entitled expression, like they were reflections in a cracked mirror, feeding off each other's arrogance. "All right," I said quietly. Harry smirked, mistaking my calm for surrender. "Good. Now about that beer. I'll pack." The words cut through the room like glass. That smirk collapsed instantly, sliding from his face in slow motion. Tiffany's mouth opened slightly, her lips trembling with the beginnings of a word she couldn't quite form. They had both expected me to bend, to apologize, to shuffle toward the kitchen like a beaten dog. But instead, I turned toward the hallway. Behind me, I heard Harry suck in a sharp breath, his bravado punctured for the first time. Tiffany's voice cracked into the silence. "Dad, wait." But my footsteps were steady, deliberate, each one echoing against the hardwood floor. Martha and I had refinished together 2 decades earlier. Every creak beneath my shoes felt like her voice whispering, "Keep walking, don't stop now." The suitcase came down from the closet shelf with a soft thump. The same brown leather suitcase I had bought for our honeymoon to Yellowstone. Back then it had carried dreams, the promise of shared adventures. Now it sat gaping open on the bed, waiting to devour the remains of a life I had poured into this house. I packed methodically, like a soldier preparing for a campaign. Underwear, socks, 3 changes of clothes, not everything, just enough to remind them I wasn't coming back tomorrow. From the living room came the muffled hum of urgent whispers. Tiffany's voice rose and fell, desperate, while Harry's was sharp, cutting, as though he could bully her into agreement the same way he had tried to bully me. My hands didn't falter. Shirts folded into perfect squares, TTs rolled with precision. The photograph of Martha, her smile caught forever in soft Polaroid light, slipped into the side pocket, carefully wrapped in tissue. My medications, my reading glasses. The small leather journal where I had tracked every expense since the day I retired. By the time the zipper slid closed, the decision was final. When I wheeled the suitcase down the hallway, their whispers died instantly. Harry had reclaimed the recliner, but his posture was different. No longer careless, no longer smug. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes locked on me as though he was trying to decipher my next move. Tiffany hovered by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, her attempt at sternness undone by the flicker of doubt in her eyes. Neither of them spoke. Neither said goodbye. The Buick started on the first turn of the key, as reliable as it had been for 20 years. I backed out of the driveway without looking back, without checking the windows to see if they watched me go. That house was no longer mine, and they were no longer family. The 30-minute drive to Pine Lodge was a blur of headlights and memories. Every mile marker seemed to drag another ghost from the past. Tiffany's college tuition, $40,000 a year for that private school she insisted on. I had worked overtime at the bank, buried myself under stacks of loan applications, my hands cramping from late-night signatures, just to keep up with the payments. Her wedding, $25,000. Harry's family couldn't afford their share, so I had quietly covered it, swallowing the cost to spare them embarrassment. The reception hall, the flowers, the dress, all perfect for my little girl's special day. Then came the house. $80,000 ripped from my retirement savings, handed over for their down payment because young couples need a start. That's what I told myself. That's what Martha would have wanted. But the truth, every dollar was a sacrifice. My Social Security check bled into their mortgage, into their utilities, into their groceries. I convinced myself it was love, that I was keeping the family whole. But sitting behind the wheel of that old Buick, I finally saw it for what it was. They hadn't built their lives. I had built it for them. And now, they had the audacity to call it theirs. Pine Lodge Motel stood on the outskirts of town, a sagging row of rooms with peeling paint and a neon sign that buzzed and flickered against the night sky. My room was small, anonymous, 4 beige walls, a single bed, a chair, and a tiny table under the window. It smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness. I set the suitcase on the luggage rack and lowered myself onto the mattress. The silence pressed down heavy. Not the familiar, comfortable quiet of my old home, filled with the echoes of Martha's presence, but the hollow emptiness of a space that belonged to no one. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through my contacts. Banks, insurance companies, credit card services, numbers I knew by heart after 30 years in finance. My fingers hovered, tempted before I slid the phone back onto the table. Not tonight. But soon, the laptop screen lit the room in a pale glow as I logged into my accounts. Numbers filled the page: savings, checking, retirement. Each balance glowed like a monument to a lifetime of discipline. Every denied luxury. Every night I'd chosen work over leisure. Every dream I'd set aside so Tiffany could chase hers. The cursor blinked in the search bar, waiting for me to choose my first move. Sunday morning arrived gray and heavy, the clouds pressing low over the motel roof. The light that filtered through the thin curtains was the color of steel, cold and merciless. I spread my papers across the motel's tiny table: bank statements, insurance policies, legal documents. It looked less like a desk and more like a war room. Each page was a weapon, each signature a bullet. I stared down at them, my breathing steady, my heart oddly calm. This was no longer grief, no longer disappointment. This was strategy. The first call went to First National Bank, and with that single dial tone, the war began. Sunday banking was limited, but automated systems never slept. The hold music faded, replaced by the crisp voice of a woman who had no idea how much power she was about to help me reclaim. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. How can I help you today?" Her tone was polite, professional, just another routine call in her shift. But for me, it was a battle horn. "I need to cancel the automatic mortgage payment for 847 Pine Street," I said calmly. "The account ending in 4729. There was a pause on the other end. I pictured her fingers flying over the keyboard, lines of numbers flashing across her screen. "Sir, I show that payment has been active for 5 years. Are you sure you want to discontinue it?" I leaned back in the motel chair, staring at the sagging wallpaper. "Completely sure." Another pause. A slight shift in her voice, cautious curiosity. "May I ask the reason for the change?" I almost smiled. "The homeowners no longer qualify for my financial assistance." Her typing resumed. "Very well, Mr. Miller. The automatic payment will be canceled effective immediately. You should receive written confirmation within 3 business days." Click. One burden gone. The second call was easier. Geico. 2 vehicles, Harry's Silverado and Tiffany's Honda, both insured under my policy for 3 years. 2 vehicles I had never touched, but had dutifully paid for every single month. "I need to remove 2 vehicles from my policy," I told the agent. "My daughter and son-in-law will need to establish their own coverage. When would you like this change to take effect?" "Today." The credit cards took longer. 3 accounts, 3 open veins bleeding me dry. Tiffany had been an authorized user on each Visa, MasterCard, even the Costco store card. $500 a month, groceries, clothes, gadgets, things I never bought and never needed, charged under my name. "Mr. Miller, removing authorized users will require them to apply for their own credit," the representative explained. "Any outstanding balances will remain your responsibility, but they won't be able to make new charges." "I understand," I said firmly. "Remove them immediately." One by one, the chains fell. Each call felt like lifting a weight from my shoulders. Each polite confirmation number was another lock clicking shut behind me, keeping them out for good. 30 years in banking had taught me the system's pressure points. I knew the legal language, the loopholes, the fine print. Everything I was doing was by the book, irrefutable, permanent, final. The life insurance took longer, but I started the process. $100,000 that had been earmarked for Tiffany, money meant to protect her future, to shield her from hardship. But family, I realized now, wasn't blood. It was loyalty. And loyalty was something she had already traded away. By noon, 8 calls were complete. Mortgage canceled. Insurance gone. Credit access revoked. Transfers stopped. The bleeding ended with nothing more than a series of polite conversations and confirmation codes scrawled across motel stationery. I sat back in the stiff motel chair, staring at my notes. Reference numbers. Effective dates. Each line was the record of my liberation. My phone sat silent on the table. No missed calls yet. No frantic messages. Not yet. They didn't know. They wouldn't know until the first bill landed in their mailbox. Until the first bank agent demanded money they didn't have. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, an elderly couple was loading suitcases into a pickup truck. The man lifted carefully, while the woman supervised, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Partners in rhythm, in routine. Martha and I had been like that once. The sight twisted something inside me, but it didn't weaken me. It steeled me. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring. The week passed quietly for me, but for them, it unraveled. At Pine Lodge, I carved out a routine. Coffee in the lobby each morning, the cheap kind that burned the tongue. Breakfast at the little diner down the street, where the waitress called everyone on. Long meandering walks through Kalispell's quiet neighborhoods, my thoughts pacing alongside me. Meanwhile, my phone became a museum of missed calls. By Wednesday, 12 messages. By Friday, 22. I listened to them all in order, sitting on the edge of the motel bed, as the voices of my daughter and her husband spilled through the speaker. The first few were casual. Tiffany's voice, strained but steady. "Dad, maybe there's been a mistake with the mortgage payment. Can you check?" Then Harry, annoyed, clipped. "Clark, Geico's saying my insurance lapsed. Fix it. I've got people asking questions." By midweek, the panic bled through. Tiffany's voice cracked as she begged. "Dad, the bank says you stopped the automatic payment. They want the full amount by Friday, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings. Please, tell me, this is a mistake." Harry's tone shifted from arrogance to desperation, though he masked it with anger. "Clark, you need to call me back. You're making us look like deadbeats. Do you understand what this does to me at work?" By the end, Tiffany was sobbing, her words fractured. "Dad, please, please call me. We can work this out. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry," and Harry, his voice lower now, calculated. "Maybe I came on too strong. I shouldn't have pushed you. Let's fix this, Clark. We're family. Don't do this." I deleted each message after listening, my thumb pressing erase without hesitation. No anger, no satisfaction, just a curious detachment, like watching actors perform a script I already knew the ending to. Thursday morning, a knock at the motel door. Through the peephole, I saw them both. Tiffany in a wrinkled sweater, her eyes rimmed red, hair unwashed. Harry in stained work clothes, his jaw tight, but his shoulders slumped, like a man who hadn't slept. For a long moment, I considered leaving them there in the hallway, letting them feel the weight of the silence they had once forced on me. But finally, I turned the latch and opened the door. I didn't invite them in. "Dad," Tiffany's voice cracked. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. And in that instant, the battle lines were clear. Her composure cracked like thin glass under pressure. "We need to talk." "About what?" I asked, my voice flat, calm, a still lake before the storm. Harry didn't wait. He shoved himself forward, his face flushed, a vein pulsing at his temple. "About the fact that you're trying to ruin our lives over some stupid argument about beer." The memory flickered, his smug grin in my living room. Tiffany's silence, the ultimatum that severed the last thread of loyalty. I felt nothing now but clarity. "I'm not trying to ruin anything," I said evenly. "I'm simply no longer paying for your lives." Harry's voice shot up like a firecracker, loud enough that I knew half the motel could hear. The mortgage, Clark. You can't just stop paying the mortgage. That's our house. I let his words hang for a beat. Then quietly, actually, it's my house. My name on the deed. My signature on the loan. You two were just guests. Tiffany grabbed his arm, trying to rein him back. Her eyes glistened, the red rims of sleepless nights betraying her. Dad, please, we can work this out. Harry was wrong to talk to you that way. We both were. But you can't just leave us with no warning, no discussion. I fixed her with a stare sharp enough to cut glass. You gave me an ultimatum. Do what Harry says, or get out. Those were your exact words. Her lips trembled. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said, each word landing like a gavel. You meant every word. You just didn't expect me to choose option 2. Harry's posture shifted, anger giving way to a mock calm, his tone suddenly syrupy, rehearsed. Look, we all said things we didn't mean, but you're talking about our home, our credit, our whole lives. You can't just pull the rug out like this. I met his stare with the quiet finality of a man who had already won. I can, and I did. I started to close the door. You wanted me to leave. I left. You wanted to handle your own lives. Now you can. Dad, wait. Tiffany's voice cracked, breaking through his performance. What about family? What about everything we've been through together? For the briefest moment, I saw the child she used to be, the little girl running barefoot through autumn leaves, pressing dandelions into my hand like they were treasures. But the image dissolved into the present, a woman who had stood by while her husband humiliated me in my own home. Family works both ways, sweetheart, I said softly. I spent 5 years taking care of you both. When it was time for you to take care of me, you chose him instead. Harry's mask slipped, his fake composure shattered into raw venom. You crazy old bastard. You can't just— I can call the police. I cut him off coldly, my hand steady on the door. If you keep raising your voice, this is private property, and you're disturbing the peace. For the first time in years, they looked at me. Truly looked at me. Not as the soft-hearted father, not as the convenient wallet on legs, but as a man who had finally remembered his spine. Harry grabbed Tiffany's elbow. Come on, we'll figure this out ourselves. They walked back to their car. Harry's swagger melted into a worried hunch, Tiffany glancing over her shoulder like she was leaving a stranger behind. I shut the door. The latch clicked, sealing the moment. But the work wasn't over. Not yet. There were still accounts to close, still ties to cut. Dismantling a relationship, no, an illusion, took precision. And I intended to finish it. The next morning, I needed air. I needed routine. Tuesday, coffee. The diner on Main Street. The same bell over the door, the same haze of bacon grease and fresh bread, the same corner booth Martha and I once shared after her doctor's appointments. We'd split a slice of apple pie back then, talking about nothing, everything. Those were the days before betrayal hollowed out the word family. The comfort of routine grounded me after yesterday's confrontation. I spread my papers across the table like a general reviewing battle plans, statements, confirmation codes, accounts closed, each line a victory, each number a weapon. The bell above the door jingled again. A voice broke through the hum of conversation. Clark Miller. Well, I'll be damned. I looked up. Bob Harrison, an old colleague from First National, newspaper tucked under his arm, his weathered face breaking into a grin. 15 years of coffee breaks, long lunches, shared war stories about difficult clients. Bob, I said, standing to shake his hand. Good to see you. He slid into the booth without waiting. Haven't seen you since Martha's service. Heard you moved out to Pine Lodge. Everything all right? The waitress poured coffee before I could answer. I used the moment to measure my words. Bob was trustworthy, but he was also a banker. Family situation, I said finally. Needed some space to think things through. Bob studied me with a look that was half concern, half calculation. Then he leaned back, as if deciding something. That son-in-law of yours. He paused, lowering his voice. Tried to pull a fast one on us a few months back. My cup froze halfway to my lips. What kind of fast one? Wanted a home equity loan. $50,000, on your house. The words hit like a thunderclap. My house. That's right. Brought in documents, claimed it was his property. At first glance they looked official. Bob shook his head grimly. But when we ran the title search, everything came back clean. Your name, your signature. No co-signers, no liens. Nothing that gave him any claim. I set the cup down carefully, my pulse pounding in my ears. When was this? December. Maybe January. I handled it personally because of the amount. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. Clark, it wasn't a mistake. The documents he brought in were forged. The diner's noise faded around me. Forks clinking, conversations buzzing, all of it dimmed to silence. 3 months ago, Harry had already been planning to rob me. This wasn't desperation born of my silence. This wasn't panic over missed payments. This was premeditated, calculated. Betrayal laid out in black ink on forged paper. Did you report it? I asked, my throat dry. We flagged it. Rejected the application, kept copies of everything. But technically, since no money changed hands, it's a gray area. Not exactly prosecutable. I leaned back slowly, my jaw tightening. He had sat across from me at dinner, complaining about bills, about debt, while secretly plotting to gut me for $50,000. What was he going to use the money for? I asked. Bob glanced around the diner, lowered his voice until it was barely a whisper. And what he said next made my blood run cold. The courthouse papers still pressed against my chest like a shield, when I stepped out into the cold Montana air. The sun was already sliding toward the horizon, washing Main Street in that burnished, late winter glow. It should have felt like peace, but inside me, every nerve was coiled tight. I wasn't just cutting financial ties anymore. I was cutting through lies, and lies always bleed. By the time I reached my motel, the evidence file on my laptop was beginning to look less like notes and more like a case. Names, dates, attempts at fraud, the weight of unpaid debts, and most important of all, proof that none of it was mine. Harry wasn't just a drunk with an attitude, he was a gambler circling the drain, desperate enough to forge documents, desperate enough to turn on family, desperate enough to push me into the corner I was finally climbing out of. But desperation makes men dangerous. And that was the thought that followed me into uneasy sleep. The next morning, I decided it was time to go public, subtly, carefully. Kalispell was a small town, too small for secrets to stay hidden long. My first encounter happened at the post office. I'd barely pulled a roll of stamps from the vending machine, when I felt eyes on me. Clark, dear, a voice chirped. I turned, Mrs. Henderson, white gloves, pearl earrings, and that permanent air of church gossip disguised as concern. She leaned in, lowering her voice, though everyone within earshot knew she wanted to be overheard. I've been hearing troubling things, about your family. Is everything all right? I studied her for a moment. The old me might have brushed it off, laughed politely, changed the subject. But that man, the pushover, the provider, the endless wallet, was gone. Everything is just fine, I said. Her eyes flickered, disappointed. That wasn't the answer she wanted. So I gave her the one that would spread fastest. It's not me who's in trouble. Harry's been overextending himself. Gambling debts, lies about property he doesn't own. I finally had to draw the line. Her lips parted just slightly, like she'd just been handed a particularly juicy recipe card. Oh my. Yes, I said simply, letting the weight of it hang there. He tried to put my house up as collateral for a loan that never existed. Forged documents. The bank caught it. I filed eviction papers yesterday. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. In a town like Kalispell, whispers traveled faster than any newspaper headline. By sunset, half the congregation would know. By Sunday service, the other half would. As I walked out of the post office, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. The truth was out there now, circling like wildfire through kitchens, diners, and church basements. Harry wanted to paint me as the villain, the bitter old man who cut off his daughter. But soon, he'd find himself standing in a storm of his own making. The debts, the fraud, the eviction notice. And me, finally holding the match. But even as I climbed back into my car, a thought gnawed at me. Cornered men don't sit still. They lash out, and Harry Thompson was about to run out of places to hide. The air outside Mrs. Henderson's porch smelled faintly of roses and cigarette smoke, The 2 cents forever married in the gossip queen's domain. She leaned forward in her rocking chair, eyes gleaming with the kind of hunger that only comes from sniffing out a scandal before anyone else could. I knew that whatever left my lips here would not stay between us, it would ripple out into Kalispell like a stone cast into still water. By Sunday service, at least a dozen ears would be buzzing with my words. And yet, that was precisely what I wanted. They asked me to move out, I said, letting the words hang heavy in the warm evening air. Her hand froze halfway to her teacup, eyebrows climbing high. They asked you to leave your own house? The disbelief in her voice was almost theatrical, but I caught the flicker of satisfaction underneath. Yes, I replied simply. It seemed like the best solution for everyone involved. Sometimes, adult children need to handle their own responsibilities. Her lips pursed, as if tasting the bitterness of my statement. Then she leaned in closer, lowering her voice until it was a conspiratorial whisper. But didn't you pay for their wedding, and help them with the down payment? Her eyes narrowed, sharper than the rim of her glasses. I always wondered how they afforded that house on Harry's salary. I only nodded. No elaboration. The facts were powerful enough on their own, and silence was often louder than protest. By the time I walked down the creaking steps of her porch, I could already imagine the phone lines lighting up across town, the hushed conversations in kitchens, and the hurried whispers exchanged in grocery aisles. The machine was in motion. My next stop was Miller's Hardware. The familiar jingle of the bell above the door welcomed me in, and the smell of sawdust and oil was oddly comforting. Tom Kowalski, hunched over his inventory sheets, looked up and his expression softened with genuine concern. "Clark," he said, setting his pen down. "Heard you're staying out at Pine Lodge. What's going on?" Before I could answer, 3 employees drifted closer, their curiosity thick in the air. So I told them, calmly, methodically, the same truth I had given Mrs. Henderson. But here, the reactions were sharper. Immediate. "You paid for their college tuition?" Dave, the assistant manager, asked, shaking his head so hard, his glasses nearly fell off. "Yes," I answered, steady and unflinching. Dave let out a low whistle, muttering. "Harry told everyone his family was well off. Said they were helping you with mortgage payments." I met his eyes, my voice calm but cutting. "Harry said a lot of things that weren't true." Tom's jaw tightened, his brow shadowed. "That explains a lot. Always seemed to have money, but never worked overtime. We offered him extra shifts plenty of times, but he always had other commitments." From behind the paint counter, Sarah's voice cut in, laced with disdain. "Those commitments were probably at the casino. My cousin's seen him there." The room went still, not from disbelief, but from the satisfaction of puzzle pieces finally locking into place. By the time I left, I knew one thing for certain: the story was out, spreading like wildfire. And in a town like Kalispell, there's no firewall strong enough to contain it. My third stop was St. Mark's Lutheran Church. The building's stained glass windows cast fractured rainbows across the pews as Pastor Williams welcomed me into his office. He poured me a cup of coffee, its steam curling like incense in the quiet room. "Clark," he began gently, "several people have mentioned they're concerned about you. Can you help me understand what's happening?" I studied him for a moment. Unlike Henderson, unlike the chatter at the hardware store, there was no hunger for gossip in his eyes, only a genuine desire to understand. I respected that. "Pastor," I said, my voice low but steady, "I've been financially supporting my daughter and son-in-law for 5 years. Last weekend, they made it clear that my presence in the house was conditional. Conditional on following Harry's orders." The words were like ash in my mouth. "So I chose to leave." He let the silence linger, giving the weight of my decision the dignity it deserved. "That must have been incredibly painful." I sipped the coffee, staring at the dark liquid swirling in my cup. It was clarifying, I admitted. "I love my daughter, but I won't be treated like a servant in my own home." Pastor Williams nodded slowly, leaning back in his chair. "Sometimes, loving someone means allowing them to face the consequences of their choices. It sounds like you've been protecting them from those consequences for a long time." I met his gaze. Too long. The afternoon sun was already sinking by the time I made my way to Annie's coffee shop. The place buzzed with Friday energy, Retirees swapping stories, mothers soothing restless toddlers, off-duty workers laughing over their cups. I tucked myself into a corner booth, listening to the hum of voices all around me. Heard Harry owes money all over town. Clark Miller's been paying their bills for years. Always seemed odd how they lived so well on his salary. I stirred the cream into my coffee, watching the swirl dissolve into perfect stillness. Everything was happening exactly as I knew it would. Small towns are like living organisms. Whispers are their bloodstream, carrying truth faster than any rumor mill or advertising campaign. And once that truth takes hold, it doesn't let go. As I rose to leave, the shrill ring of my phone cut through the chatter. Mrs. Patterson's name glowed on the screen. My neighbor of 20 years. Clark, her voice came through, hushed but urgent. I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted you to know there's been a lot of shouting at the house lately. Mostly Harry, but Tiffany too. Her words lodged deep in my chest, heavier than I wanted to admit. The storm was breaking, and for the first time, it wasn't me caught in the middle of it. Mrs. Patterson's voice lingered in my ear long after the call ended. Yesterday, the police drove by twice, she had said. Her words carried more weight than perhaps even she realized. The quiet vigilance of a neighbor who had watched my family grow for 20 years was now a lifeline of truth in a storm of lies. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Patterson. I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. There was a pause, her tone softening. Are you safe where you're staying? Do you need anything? Her concern cut through the bitterness of the past few days. A reminder that not all ties frayed with betrayal, some were reinforced by genuine care. I'm fine, thank you. Just taking things one day at a time. That night, alone in the dim motel room, I sat with the hum of the mini fridge and the flicker of a muted television casting shadows against the walls. I replayed the day's conversations in my head, each one a note in a growing symphony of truth. I didn't need to lift a finger in vengeance. The town itself was doing the work for me. Social pressure was building like a rising tide, swallowing Harry and Tiffany's lies without my push. People simply recognized injustice when it stood in the open. Then my phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't answer, but as the voicemail played, I recognized the tone instantly, professional, detached, insistent. This is Marcus Webb from Frontier Financial Services. We're looking for Harry Thompson regarding a past due account. Please call us at your earliest convenience. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. Of course. Harry had likely used my address for his credit applications, trying to anchor his sinking debts to my name. Another thread in the tapestry of deception. Another piece of evidence for my growing file. I deleted the message, opened my laptop, and carefully updated the folder where I kept everything. Emails, receipts, bank transfers, mortgage records. Proof. Cold, irrefutable proof. If Harry wanted war, he would find that I had been preparing for years without even realizing it. But I knew Harry. He would not go quietly. Saturday morning dawned clear, the kind of soft, golden light that used to make me feel at peace. But peace was short-lived. As I sipped my coffee and skimmed old bank statements, my phone erupted with calls. First Tom from the hardware store, then Mrs. Henderson, then Pastor Williams. Different voices, same message. Harry was on the move. Clark, Tom said, anger vibrating beneath his calm tone. You need to know what he's saying. He came in here an hour ago, loud as you please. Told everyone you abandoned them without warning. Claims you promised to always take care of them, then changed your mind out of spite. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. What exactly did he say? That you're having some kind of mental breakdown. Tom answered, his voice lowering. Said you threw them out because Tiffany wouldn't let you control every decision in their lives. And, he hesitated. He's claiming there's a family medical emergency. Says you're refusing to help. The words struck me like cold iron. A medical emergency. Desperation had driven Harry to twist the knife deeper, to wrap his lies in the one thing guaranteed to stir sympathy. Thank you, Tom. I said, already piecing together the strategy. Harry was cornered. His creditors must have been closing in, forcing him into this reckless campaign. Minutes later another call. This one carried the clipped authority of law enforcement. Mr. Miller, this is Detective Morrison. I wanted to give you a heads up. Harry Thompson was here this morning, filing a complaint about elder abuse. Elder abuse. The words tasted bitter. Yes, sir. He claims you're being manipulated by someone at the bank into making bad financial decisions. Said you're not competent to manage your own affairs. My grip on the phone tightened, but I kept my voice steady. And, I told him we'd need medical documentation and witness statements, Morrison replied, which of course, he didn't have. I thanked him, but the chill had already seeped into my bones. Harry wasn't just spreading rumors now, he was trying to carve an official record of my supposed incompetence. A dangerous move, and one I couldn't ignore. Then Tiffany's name flashed on my screen. Her voice was raw, dripping with tears. Dad, please pick up. I know you're angry, but there are things you don't understand. I'm pregnant, Dad. The stress from all this is making me sick. The doctor says, if things don't calm down, I could lose the baby. The words clawed at me, stirring that old familiar instinct to protect. For years it was that same pull that had opened my wallet, silenced my doubts, and made me forgive the unforgivable. Congratulations, sweetheart, I said carefully. When did you find out? Last week. Right before everything fell apart. Her voice cracked in what might have been grief, or calculation. Dad, I can't lose my baby, because of money problems. You always said family comes first. I let the silence weigh down the line before answering. Family does come first. That's why I spent $60,000 on your education, $25,000 on your wedding, and countless more keeping you afloat. But what about now? What about your grandchild? Her plea was a dagger wrapped in silk, twisting at the most vulnerable part of me. Yet something was off. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. Tiffany, I said slowly, have you seen a doctor about these complications? A pause, then I have an appointment next week. Which doctor? Dr. Richards. At the women's clinic. I leaned back, my chest tightening. I knew Dr. Richards. She had cared for Martha for years. I'll call her office, see how I can help with the medical expenses. Dad, you don't need to call, she snapped, the sharpness breaking through the fragile act. If there's a genuine emergency involving my grandchild, I said firmly, I want to help. Dr. Richards will know the best way. Her voice hardened. You can't just call my doctor, that's private. You're right, she can call me directly to discuss payment options. The line went dead, abrupt, final, and in that silence, I had my answer. An hour later, I walked downtown. The sun was bright, but the air felt heavy, charged with whispers I couldn't yet hear. Outside First National Bank, Harry's voice carried through the crowd like a carnival barker desperate to sell snake oil. He's lost his mind, Harry declared to a knot of customers. Senile old man thinks everyone's trying to steal from him. Kicked his own pregnant daughter out of the house over nothing. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some nodded along, others looked uncertain. And then they saw me. Heads turned, faces softened, and the whisper of recognition spread like wind through dry leaves. Harry spun around, the flush of anger already climbing his neck. His eyes locked onto mine, brimming with fury and fear. There he is, he shouted, his voice cracking. The man who abandoned his own family. I stepped forward, calm and deliberate, my voice level but sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. Hello, Harry, and in that moment the entire town seemed to hold its breath. The accusation landed like a sucker punch. It wasn't just words, it was a weapon, sharp and deliberate, aimed straight at Harry's chest. How's the gambling debt situation working out? I asked, my voice carrying just enough weight to make the crowd fall silent. For a moment, Harry froze. The shift in his face was almost theatrical. He blinked, his jaw tightening, his eyes darting toward the murmuring crowd as though looking for an escape route. Then came the sputtering denial. You're crazy, he stammered, his voice cracking under the strain. I don't know what you're talking about. But the crowd wasn't buying it. They'd already started whispering, the sound of murmurs spreading like wildfire, each voice carrying fragments of a puzzle that had suddenly begun to make sense. $18,000, I continued, calm but merciless, according to Detective Morrison. Glacier Peaks Casino. Mostly poker tables. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people turned to each other with wide eyes. Others pulled out their phones, already recording, already memorializing this unraveling moment. I looked around at them, then back at Harry. Amazing, isn't it? How much money a man can lose when he's not paying his own living expenses. Harry's skin turned from flushed red to a deep, dangerous purple. His nostrils flared. He stepped forward, using his size and height like a cudgel, trying to intimidate me the way he had done countless times in the past. "You senile old bastard," he spat. "You can't just—" "I can document." I cut him off, my voice firm and deliberate. "Every dollar I've spent supporting you for 5 years, can you document where your paychecks went?" That was the kill shot. The crowd leaned in, their attention hooked, their judgment palpable. The tide had shifted. Harry could feel it. His eyes darted nervously. His lips parted as if to say more, but no words came. He knew he was losing control of the narrative, losing the battle he thought he could dominate. Finally, he growled, pushing through the wall of onlookers. "Come on. This isn't over, Clark," and just like that, he stormed away. But the damage was done. Phones had recorded every second, and I knew within the hour, the real story would be circling social media like vultures over a battlefield. Later, back at the motel, I sat at my desk, laptop open, the glow of the screen reflecting the storm in my thoughts. I began documenting everything, every word, every threat, every glance. Harry's counterattacks were built on lies, and lies don't survive in daylight. The community knew me. They trusted my character. They'd seen my years of work, my quiet patience, my integrity. Harry's accusations, that I was senile, that I was abandoning family, those things rang hollow, but one claim wouldn't leave me alone. The pregnancy, Tiffany's pregnancy. If it was true, it complicated everything. If it was a lie, it was a weapon sharpened against me. I couldn't ignore it. I picked up the phone and dialed Dr. Richards's office. If there was a real emergency, I would help. I always would, but I wouldn't be manipulated by another fabricated crisis. Harry had already crossed the line. I hung up and walked to the window. Downtown's neon lights flickered in the distance, reflecting off rain-slick pavement. Somewhere out there, Harry was fuming, his anger curdling into something darker. That's when I made the call. "James, we need to talk." I told Detective Morrison. His voice came steady, professional. "What happened now?" He confronted me publicly. I explained. Made threatening gestures in front of witnesses, his whole demeanor. It's like watching someone losing control, escalating. "I want to file a formal complaint, maybe even explore protection options." "Bring any documentation you have," Morrison said, "tomorrow morning." First thing. But I wouldn't need to wait until morning. An hour later, a knock rattled my motel door. Steve Brennan, the Pine Lodge night manager, stood there. Stocky, solid, the kind of man who'd seen combat, and could smell trouble long before it arrived. "Mr. Miller," he said, voice low. "That man who was yelling in our parking lot earlier, he came back. About 20 minutes ago. Stood outside your door. 5 minutes, maybe more. Then left. Made some guests nervous." My stomach tightened. "Did he say anything?" Steve nodded grimly. "Muttered something about teaching old fools lessons. We've got it on security video, if you need it." That was it. That was the evidence I needed. Physical proof. Harry wasn't just spiraling, he was stalking. "Steve," I said, my voice steady, "would you be willing to provide that footage to the police?" He didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. A guy like that shouldn't be intimidating." Elderly residents. The following morning, I walked into the police station carrying 2 things, Steve's USB drive and a carefully written timeline of Harry's escalating behavior. Detective Morrison met me at his desk, his eyes scanning the documents, his jaw tightening with every line. When he finally looked up, his voice carried the weight of finality. "Clark," he said, "this shows a clear pattern of intimidation. Combined with what I saw yesterday at the bank, we have grounds for a restraining order." And for the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. But it was fragile, because I knew Harry, and Harry didn't quit. He was wounded now, cornered and cornered. Men don't always retreat. Sometimes, they attack. The detective's words landed like a bucket of ice water, poured straight down my back. "Adverse possession laws," Jim said. I blinked. "You mean squatters' rights?" He nodded, his expression grim. "Harry consulted a lawyer about it Friday. He was researching whether he could take ownership of your house based on continuous occupancy." The air in the station seemed to grow heavier. The walls felt closer, my pulse quickened. Jim leaned forward, his voice steady but edged with disgust. Montana requires 5 years of hostile occupation. They've been there 3. He was planning to wait 2 more, then file a claim. The implications staggered me. My knees felt weak, and I gripped the arm of the chair for balance. Harry hadn't just been freeloading, he hadn't just been mooching off my generosity, he had been executing a long-term plan, deliberate, cold, calculated, to steal my home out from under me. The house I built, the house where Tiffany grew up. Does he have any claim? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jim shook his head. None. Adverse possession requires hostile occupation without the owner's permission. You gave them permission. They never paid rent, never paid property taxes. There's no legal basis. He pulled a file from his desk drawer, setting it between us like a verdict. But Clark, this shows premeditation. He's been planning this theft for years. I sat there in silence, my mind replaying every beer fetched, every insult ignored, every manipulative smile Harry had offered. The beer incident, it wasn't about dominance, it was about deception. A performance to protect a bigger lie. What about the restraining order? I finally asked. Jim's face softened slightly. I can fast-track it. Given this evidence, you'll have it by this afternoon. When I left the police station, I was no longer just a father-in-law who'd been wronged. I was a man who had seen the full measure of my enemy. Harry hadn't stumbled into arrogance. He had constructed it, piece by piece, for years. And now, I was done playing defense. Walking back to my car, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marcus Webb's number. Frontier Financial Services. One of Harry's creditors, who had left too many voicemails. Mr. Webb, I said when he picked up. My tone was businesslike, precise. I'm returning your call about Harry Thompson. I need to clarify something important. He does not live at my address. He has no legal claim to my property. He listed my address on his applications fraudulently. If you're looking for him, he works at Mountain View Auto Dealership, on Highway 93. Click. Done. The next call was to Continental Credit Recovery. Same message. Calm. Clinical. Final. This is Clark Miller. I want to make it clear, Harry Thompson has no ownership interest in my property. He is no longer residing there. One by one, I dismantled the lies Harry had built. 6 collection agencies by noon. 6 fires started in the house of cards he thought he had built so carefully. That afternoon, Judge Morrison signed the restraining order. The words echoed in my mind as I left the courthouse. Harry Thompson is legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of you or your property. Violation means immediate arrest. Justice, swift and unyielding. 3 years Harry had spent plotting to steal my home. And now, he couldn't even walk down the driveway without risking jail. As I drove back to Pine Lodge, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short, venomous. This isn't over, old man. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. Then I forwarded it to Detective Morrison, blocked the number, and tucked the phone away. Evidence collection had become second nature. Monday morning, I filed the restraining order. By noon, I was watching Harry's world collapse from every angle. The courthouse clerk's voice was brisk, efficient. Mr. Miller, this order is effective immediately. Any contact or approach within 500 feet constitutes a violation. I thanked her, stepped out into the sun, and knew the sheriff's deputy would be serving Harry the papers within hours. That's when my phone rang again. Mike Brennan, Harry's boss. Clark. Mike said, his tone wary. I need to ask you something directly. Are the things Harry's been saying about you true? I kept my voice steady. What has he been saying? That you had some kind of breakdown. That you threw him out because of dementia. That there's a family medical emergency, and you're refusing to help. Mike paused, his voice dipping lower. Thing is, Clark, I've known you for 20 years. This doesn't sound like the man who co-signed my son's first car loan. I exhaled slowly. Mike, Harry gave me an ultimatum. Obey his orders, or leave my own house. I chose to leave. There's no medical emergency. My mind is sharp, and both my banker and my lawyer will confirm it. As for the police, well, Detective Morrison can speak to that himself. A long silence. Then Mike spoke again, heavy with resignation. I was afraid of that. Clark, I've had 3 customers today mention Harry owing them money. One recognized him from the casino. This is affecting my business. I can't have that kind of controversy around my showroom. I'm going to have to let him go. 20 minutes later, I sat at Annie's coffee shop, steam rising from my cup, when I saw it. The first debt collector's car pulling up to my former house. Bold letters across the magnetic door sign. Continental Credit Recovery. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know what was happening. The house of cards was folding in on itself. My phone buzzed again. Tiffany's number. Her voice was sharp, panicked. Dad, there are men at the house asking about Harry's debts. They want to know about our assets, our income, everything. I lifted my cup slowly, the bitter coffee warming my throat as I listened. The storm had reached their doorstep, and it was only beginning. Her voice carried genuine panic now, trembling over the phone line. Dad, what did you tell them? I took a slow breath, steadying my tone. I told them the truth, that Harry doesn't own my property, that he no longer lives here. Her words came in a rush, brittle and frightened. But they're talking about garnishing wages, seizing assets. Dad, I don't understand any of this. I leaned against the car door, eyes fixed on the horizon. Sweetheart, that's what happens when someone borrows money they can't repay. Those are the consequences Harry created, not me. Silence. Then a whisper, almost childlike. He owes $18,000. How is that even possible? I closed my eyes. She really hadn't known the full extent. Gambling debts, I said softly. Glacier Peaks Casino, according to Detective Morrison. Another silence, heavier this time. Then barely audible. He told me he was working overtime those nights. The lie hit her harder than the debt ever could. I'm sorry you're learning this way, Tiffany, I said gently. But better now than later. Her voice cracked again. And the sheriff's deputy was here too. Served Harry some kind of papers. He's been ranting, throwing things. He looks unhinged. I felt my jaw tighten. The restraining order, I explained. Harry's just realizing his options have evaporated completely. Dad, he's talking about leaving town. Says there's nothing left here for him. What am I supposed to do? The ache in her words was familiar. The same tone I remembered from her childhood, when scraped knees felt like the end of the world. But this wound ran deeper. Make decisions based on who Harry really is. I told her, my voice steady. Not who you hoped he was. That evening I parked across the street from my former house. The one Harry had plotted for years to steal. The scene unfolding inside was chaos. 3 different creditor vehicles had come and gone throughout the day. The walls of deception were finally crumbling. Mrs. Patterson next door spotted me sitting quietly in my car. She gave a small sad wave, the kind of wave from someone who has witnessed too much but doesn't know how to help. Through the window, I could see Harry and Tiffany. His arms flailing, his movements sharp and violent, as if every word was a blade he threw at her. Tiffany's posture was small, defensive, her back against the wall, her hands raised as if to shield herself from words that cut as deep as fists. The fairy tale marriage, built on my financial foundation, was disintegrating before my eyes. Reality had finally forced its way inside. My phone buzzed. A text from Steve at Pine Lodge. That guy tried to get in the building again. Told him about the restraining order. He left, but he was really angry. I immediately forwarded it to Detective Morrison. Another violation. Another nail in Harry's coffin. But his desperation made him dangerous, and that made him predictable. A man with gambling debts, no job, and a restraining order had 2 choices. Face his responsibilities, or run. And if I knew Harry, running was in his nature. Driving back to Pine Lodge, I couldn't shake the question, if Harry fled, would Tiffany go with him, or would she finally open her eyes? I'd spent 5 years shielding her from the weight of reality. That shield had shattered the day they forced me to choose between my dignity and their demands. And I had chosen dignity. Now they would have to choose their own path forward. By Wednesday morning, I'd seen enough. 2 days of chaos was enough to know where things were heading. It was time for clarity. I called Tiffany. Meet me at the diner, just you. Her voice was hesitant. I can't leave Harry alone right now, Dad. He's really struggling with everything that's happening. My reply was firm. Then we have nothing to discuss. The restraining order means I can't be around him anyway. A pause, a long silence where I could almost hear the war inside her. Then finally, where do you want to meet? Main Street Diner. 2 o'clock, back corner booth. I arrived early. Always early. I chose the booth that faced away from the street, so there would be no excuses, no distractions, just truth. When Tiffany walked in, she looked older than 28, worn down, stress carved into lines around her eyes. She slid into the seat across from me, fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse. Her words spilled out immediately. "Dad, I know you're angry, but Harry's lost his job. These debt collectors won't stop calling. The phone rings constantly. People show up at the door demanding money we don't have." I raised a hand, waited until she stopped. Then I spoke, calm but deliberate. "I'm offering you one chance to end this with some dignity, Tiffany." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "Public acknowledgement of the truth. Full disclosure of how much I supported you both. And an honest explanation of why I left." Her face flushed. "You want me to humiliate myself in front of the whole town?" "No," I said, leaning forward. "I want you to tell the truth. There's a difference." Her voice faltered. "What kind of acknowledgement?" I had spent 2 days deciding. 2 days sharpening justice into something undeniable. Church announcement this Sunday during testimony time. A letter to the editor of the Tribune. A Facebook post visible to all our mutual friends. Full details, tuition, wedding costs, mortgage payments, and the ultimatum that drove me out of my own home. Her voice shook. "Dad, people will think, they'll think you had a father who loved you enough to sacrifice his retirement for your happiness. And that you took it for granted until it was gone." Her eyes fell to her coffee cup, untouched, hands trembling. "What about Harry?" "Harry is no longer part of any equation involving me. The restraining order is permanent. If you choose to stay with him, that's your decision. But it means choosing him over any relationship with me." Her lip quivered. "You're asking me to choose between my husband and my father." "No," I said softly. "I'm asking you to choose between a man who threatened me and a man who raised you. The fact that you see those as equal tells me how far we've drifted." Her silence was heavy. Painful. Then she whispered, "What about the house? It's been in our family for generations." I leaned back. My voice was calm. Final. "It's going to the Montana Veterans Housing Initiative. 3 families of veterans will live there. People who understand what service and sacrifice truly mean." The words hit her like a blow. She flinched. "The will's already changed. Witnessed. Signed. Filed with my attorney." Even now I kept my tone gentle but unyielding. "Even if you do everything I've asked perfectly, the house won't come back to you. That decision is final." Her eyes brimmed with tears. "Why?" "Because I need to know," I said, "that any reconciliation between us is built on love, not on inheritance. For 5 years, you treated me like a convenient funding source. Now I want to see if there's anything left between us beyond money." Her coffee sat untouched. Her hands trembled, and for the first time in years, Tiffany had no words. Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time. Not the crocodile kind I'd seen before. No manipulation, just raw regret. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I really am. I never meant for things to go this far." I looked at her. My daughter, the girl I had once carried on my shoulders through summer parades. The girl who used to braid dandelions into crowns and beg for bedtime stories about princesses who were always brave enough to do the right thing. And now, here she was, trembling, broken, a woman caught between love, loyalty, and truth. But sorry wasn't enough anymore. "Sorry," I said quietly, "is just a word, Tiffany. The whole town watched you and Harry treat me like a servant in my own home. They watched you side with him while he barked orders at me. They watched you give me ultimatums in the house I built with my own hands." I leaned forward, my voice steady, calm. "Words are easy. I need to see actions." Her lips trembled. "What if I can't do it? What if I can't stand up in front of everyone and admit how wrong we were?" "Then," I said, "you'll live with the consequences of that choice. Harry will leave. Men like him always do when the walls close in. You can go with him and keep living in his shadow, or you can finally stand on your own 2 feet, rebuild with honesty, and face the truth." I let the silence stretch, heavy as stone. "And if I do what you're asking," she whispered, "then maybe," I said slowly, "maybe we can begin to build something real again. Not based on guilt, not based on money, but on respect. Two adults facing each other as equals. Her hands shook as she dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. How long do I have? Sunday morning. 10 o'clock. Church. Her body sagged as though the weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders. She stood, fragile, older than her years. At the door she stopped. Dad. Her voice cracked. Do you think you could ever forgive me? I studied her. Really studied her. Not the woman who had chosen Harry over me. Not the stranger who'd thrown me out of my own home. But the daughter I once knew. Forgiveness and trust are different things, Tiffany. I said softly. I forgave you the day I walked out instead of fighting. But trust, I shook my head. Trust has to be earned. One honest action at a time. She nodded. Then she was gone. Sunday morning came clear and cold. The sanctuary was fuller than usual. Word had traveled fast. Whispers filled the air, speculation buzzing like static. I sat in my usual pew, 3 rows from the front, my hands folded, my jaw set. Waiting. When testimony time came, the room seemed to hold its breath. Tiffany rose from the back row, small, fragile, but her steps were steady. Each one echoed like a drumbeat. At the podium she gripped the wood as though it were the only thing keeping her upright. She lifted her chin. Her voice rang out clear. I need to tell you all something important about my father. The words came. Words the congregation didn't expect. Numbers, sacrifices, details they could not deny. 5 years of financial support, $160,000 for her education, $25,000 for a wedding Harry's family never paid a dime toward. Mortgage payments, grocery bills, utility checks, even car insurance. She told them everything, every dollar, every sacrifice, every humiliation. The sanctuary was silent, but the weight of the truth pressed on every soul. And then the heart of it. 3 weeks ago Tiffany's voice cracked. We gave my father an ultimatum. Obey Harry, or leave his own home. He chose his dignity. I chose my husband. I was wrong. Gasps, whispers, tears. Every face turned toward me, then back to her. Her final words cut through the silence like a blade. My father deserved gratitude, respect. Instead we gave him demands. I can't undo the past, but today I choose the truth. The congregation erupted, not with judgment, but with murmurs of support, compassion, even relief. Pastor Williams himself had tears in his eyes. After the service, hands gripped mine, voices offered words of encouragement. Neighbors who had watched from the outside finally understood the full story. But the most important moment came when Tiffany found me outside. The letter to the Tribune runs Wednesday. The Facebook post goes up tonight. Her voice was steady, honest. She hesitated, then added Harry's gone. Packed his truck, disappeared. No note, no goodbye. Just, gone. I wasn't surprised. Men like Harry never stayed when the debts came due. She lowered her voice. I filed for divorce this morning. He'd been using my credit cards for gambling. The debts are worse than we thought. 3 months later, I stood in the front yard of what used to be my home, watching 3 veteran families move in. The Montana Veterans Housing Initiative had turned the house into apartments. New beginnings. For people who knew the meaning of sacrifice. And me. I found peace in a small lakeside cabin. Fishing. Reading. Simple routines that felt like luxuries after years of chaos. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Tiffany. Dad, I'm 3 months into counseling. Could we try coffee sometime? I want to earn your trust back. One conversation at a time. I smiled, watching the sun sink behind the Rockies. Sometimes dignity is rewarded. Sometimes patience pays off. And sometimes a daughter finds her way home again. If this story struck a chord with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're ready for another story of betrayal, justice and redemption, click the box on your screen now. Because some truths are worth waiting for.